Thank you, Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to both of our witnesses. And Secretary Mnuchin, I just want to say, I appreciate your responsiveness. I don't always necessarily like what I hear, but I appreciate your responsiveness. And in this business, no one ever says that. So thank you for whenever we've called you, you've been very responsive. Chairman Powell, Secretary Mnuchin, is it a good idea for states to raise taxes and send hundreds of thousands of essential public workers off the front lines into the unemployment lines during a pandemic and a recession?
No, it's not a good idea.
Chairman Powell?
No, I would agree. Not a good idea.
So you both agree that despite facing a historic $3 trillion deficit this year as well, fiscal austerity is bad economic policy, which would cause additional pain during this recession. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think we have to be careful, but I am supportive of additional fiscal measures, as I've noted earlier.
Yeah, I just would add, I think there is a time coming when we're going to need to get back on a sustainable fiscal path, but I wouldn't prioritize that in the very near term when we're still in the middle of the pandemic.
And I agree, and that's my point. It's while we're in the midst of a pandemic. I would just note that Moody's, once again, its latest calculus shows that states and local governments are still somewhere in the $500 billion area of need. And like the federal government, our local communities are facing skyrocketing costs and declining revenues due to the pandemic. But unlike the federal government, they can't borrow money to get through the crisis. Instead, they're being forced to do the unthinkable, lay off hundreds of thousands of teachers, nurses, firefighters, and other essential workers at a time when we need them the most. But there is bipartisan support to avoid such a disaster. The $500 billion included in the SMART Act, which I authored and introduced with 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats back in May, mirrors the bipartisan House bill that exists. And even President Trump said he supports, and I quote, something like the $1.5 trillion bipartisan proposal. Mr. Secretary, as the lead negotiator for the White House, are you optimistic about getting Senate Republicans to support President Trump's call for a much larger stimulus package that includes state and local funding?
Well, the president has expressed flexibility to give more money to state and local governments, and also flexibility for the money we've already sent. And as I've said before, I look forward to sitting down with both Democrats and Republicans to see if we can agree on bipartisan support that is very necessary across the economy, targeted.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that your bigger challenge is going to be with those in the Republican caucus, of which Senator McConnell himself has said there's about 20 members of his caucus who don't want to vote for anything more. And I think there isn't any economist I have seen that suggests that not doing anything more in the midst of this pandemic is going to meet the challenges of families, of small businesses, and getting us back in shape. Secretary Mnuchin, in June, Chairman Powell issued a statement on racial equality that said, quote, everyone deserves the opportunity to participate fully in our society and in our economy. These principles guide us in all that we do, from monetary policy to our work to ensure fair access to credit across the country. And on Tuesday, before the House Financial Services Committee, he stated, quote, the rise in joblessness has been especially severe for lower wage workers, for women, and for African Americans and Hispanics. Mr. Secretary, would you agree with those statements?
I would.
So I've heard from a number of minority-owned businesses, and I know that in a previous answer there was a suggestion that PPP, well, there are minority-owned businesses in the 500-plus category. For example, in our nation, Hispanic Broadcasting, which serves an essential need in informing, a large part of the American society, would be in that middle market, but they're just some. I think we have an opportunity right now to demonstrate our commitment to serving minority communities in your implementation of the Mainstream program. So, Mr. Secretary, could you commit to reviewing the terms of the Main Street program to identify what changes could strengthen minority-owned business participation and share that analysis with me?
I will, and let me just say, I know Senator Warner has been working on, and I've spoken to Senator Crapo and Senator Scott and others about reallocating some of our money and committing $10 billion to CDFIs that could be leveraged to $100 billion of immediate lending into those communities that are especially hard hit. So I would encourage this committee to continue to look at that proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.